The grand hall of the Velthari Palace stretched higher than most starships could fly. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen stars, each one worth more than a small planet. Hundreds of alien species filled the massive space, their voices creating a symphony of strange sounds. Some chirped, others rumbled, and a few communicated through flashes of colored light on their skin. This was the Centennial Summit, held once every 100 years, where the galaxy's most powerful civilizations gathered to make peace and trade agreements. Hyenwu stood near the back of the human delegation, trying not to look as nervous as he felt. He was 28 years old, and this was his first major diplomatic mission. His dark suit felt too tight around his collar, and he kept checking the small translator device in his ear to make sure it was working properly. Around him, the other human diplomats chatted quietly, reviewing their notes and strategies. Earth wanted better trade routes through Velthari space, and today's meeting could determine humanity's economic future for the next century. Princess Arin moved through the crowd with the grace of someone born to rule. Her skin was covered in silver scales that caught the light with every movement, making her look like she was wrapped in liquid metal. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with violet eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Her people, the Velthari, had built an empire spanning 3 galaxies. They were old, powerful, and generally considered humans to be interesting, but ultimately unimportant newcomers to galactic politics. She had attended dozens of these summits before, meeting thousands of representatives from countless worlds. The routine was always the same. Smile, nod, exchange pleasantries, discuss trade percentages and territorial boundaries. She could do it in her sleep. Her mind was already planning the evening state dinner when she decided to greet the human delegation personally. It was a small courtesy, nothing more. Arin walked toward the humans, her royal guards following at a respectful distance. She was 3 meters away when it hit her. The scent stopped her mid-step, her foot frozen in the air before she caught herself and planted it down. Her violet eyes went wide, pupils dilating to twice their normal size. Her breath caught in her throat. It was impossible. Completely impossible. The Velthari had olfactory senses far more sophisticated than most species. They could distinguish individual scent signatures the way humans recognized faces. Every person had a unique combination of chemical markers that never changed, not even over decades. Arin had been trained since childhood to remember important scents, to identify threats and allies in darkness or chaos, and this scent, coming from the young human man standing awkwardly near the back of his group, was identical to one burned into her memory 23 years ago. She remembered fire. She remembered screaming. She remembered the siege of Velthor Prime when she was just a child, when enemy forces had broken through the palace defenses and turned the cultural district into a war zone. She remembered her royal guards falling around her, their bodies shielding her from weapons fire until there was no one left. She remembered being alone in the burning streets, choking on smoke, certain she was going to die, and she remembered a human child. A small boy, no more than 5 years old, with tears streaming down his dirty face. He had been crying for his mother, calling out in a language Arin didn't understand. When he saw her surrounded by collapsing buildings, he had grabbed her hand. Not because he knew she was royalty. Not because he expected a reward. Simply because she needed help and he could give it. That boy had pulled her through a service tunnel he had discovered while hiding from the bombardment. His small fingers had been surprisingly strong, refusing to let go even when the ground shook from explosions above them. They had emerged together at an evacuation point where Velthari soldiers found them. The soldiers had taken Arin immediately, rushing her to safety. She had looked back, trying to see the human child. But he had disappeared into the chaos of screaming refugees and smoke. The official reports later said all humans in that sector had been evacuated or killed. No survivors. The war ended 3 months later with a peace treaty that both sides claimed as victory. No one talked about the civilian casualties. No one mentioned the children caught in the crossfire, but Arin had never forgotten that scent. The unique signature of the boy who saved her life, and now, 23 years later, that exact same scent was coming from a human. Diplomat standing 10 feet away, Hyenwu noticed the princess had stopped moving. He saw her staring at him with an intensity that made him deeply uncomfortable. Had he done something wrong? Was his translator malfunctioning? He glanced at his colleagues, but they seemed just as confused as he was. Orin forced herself to move forward. To complete the formal greeting, her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Welcome to Velthar Prime. I am Princess Orin, heir to the Eternal Throne. We are honored by your presence at this summit." The lead human diplomat bowed and began the standard reply, but Orin barely heard him. Her eyes were locked on Hyeonwoo. She breathed in deeply, analyzing every component of his scent signature. There was no mistake. The markers matched perfectly. But humans didn't live long enough for this to be the same person. Their lifespans were barely a century, and this man was clearly an adult. The child from her memory would only be years old now, unless the child had grown into this man. The thought struck her like a physical blow. Could it be possible? Had that 5-year-old boy somehow survived the siege, grown up, and become a diplomat? The mathematics worked. The timeline fit. But what were the chances that he would end up here at this summit, standing before her after all these years? "Forgive me," Orin interrupted the lead diplomat mid-sentence, "but I would like to speak with this member of your delegation." She pointed at Hyeonwoo. "I have some specific questions about Earth's petition for expanded trade routes." The lead diplomat looked surprised but nodded. "You didn't refuse a direct request from the princess." Hyeonwoo stepped forward, trying to hide his confusion behind a diplomatic smile. "Of course, Your Highness. I'm Hyeonwoo Jr., attached for the Colonial Defense Fleet. How can I help you?" Orin gestured to her guards. "Please arrange a private audience chamber. I wish to discuss this matter in detail." She looked at Hyeonwoo with those violet eyes that seemed to see straight through him. "There are things we need to talk about. Things from a long time ago?" Hyeonwoo had no idea what she meant, but something in her voice made his skin prickle with an old, forgotten feeling. Something that reminded him of fire and smoke, and being very afraid, he followed her toward the private chambers. Unaware that he was about to learn the truth about a day he couldn't remember, and a debt that had connected to species for more than 2 decades, the private chamber was smaller than Hyeonwoo expected, but far more luxurious than any room he had ever been in. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. A table of polished black stone sat in the center, surrounded by chairs that looked like they had grown from the floor itself. Princess Orin dismissed her guards with a wave of her hand. Her security chief, Commander Thalvin, a massive Valthari with dark green scales and suspicious eyes, protested immediately. "Your Highness, I cannot allow you to be alone with an unknown human. Protocol demands at least 2 guards remain inside." Orin turned to face him, and her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "I am not asking for your permission, Commander. I am giving you an order. Wait outside. If I need assistance, you will know." Thalvin looked like he wanted to argue further, but finally bowed and left the room. The door sealed behind him with a soft hiss. Suddenly, Hyeonwoo was alone with an alien princess, who had been staring at him like he was a ghost. Orin sat down and gestured for him to do the same. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, her violet eyes scanning his face as if trying to memorize every detail. Hyeonwoo shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He had been trained in diplomatic protocol, but nothing had prepared him for this kind of personal intensity. "Do you remember the siege of Velthar Prime?" Orin asked suddenly. Her voice was quiet but sharp. 23 years ago. The war between our people. The attack on the cultural district? Hyeonwoo felt his stomach tighten. He had been there. His family had been among the human colonists caught in the conflict. But he remembered almost nothing from that time. Just fragments. Fire. Smoke. Screaming. And his mother's voice calling his name before everything went dark.
"I was there,"
he admitted slowly. "But I was very young. 5 years old. I don't remember much. The trauma caused some memory loss." "Why do you ask?" Orin leaned forward. "Because I was there too. I was a child as well, and I remember everything." She took a deep breath. "I remember a human boy with tears on his face, crying for his mother. I remember him finding me when my guards were dead and the buildings were falling. I remember him taking my hand and pulling me through a tunnel to safety. I remember his scent. She paused, letting the words sink in. Your scent. Exactly as it was 23 years ago. The Velthari never forget a scent signature. It's impossible to fake, impossible to change. You are that boy, the one who saved my life. Hyan-Woo stared at her, his mind struggling to process what she w. As saying he had saved an alien princess? How could that be true when he didn't even remember doing it? His hands started shaking slightly and he gripped the edge of the table to steady them. I don't remember saving anyone, he said quietly. I barely remember anything from that day except being scared and looking for my mother. Are you sure? Could you be mistaken? We do not make mistakes about scent, Arn said firmly. Not about something this important. Your chemical signature matches perfectly, but I need to understand how. Humans age normally. You should be 28 now. The timeline fits, but I need proof. I need to know I'm not losing my mind. Hyan-Woo activated his wrist communicator, his fingers moving automatically while his brain tried to catch up with reality. I have a sister. She's a medical officer with the fleet. She has access to my records. Maybe she can help. The hologram that appeared above the table showed a young woman with short black hair and tired eyes. Jisoo had been working a double shift, and it showed. But when she saw her brother's face, she smiled. Hyan-Woo, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost, Jisoo. I need you to pull my medical records from the Velthar Prime evacuation. Everything. Psychological evaluations, genetic markers, location data. All of it. His sister's expression became serious. That's classified information. It'll take me a few minutes to get the clearances. What's going on? Just trust me, please. While they waited, Arn began describing her memories in detail. She talked about the service tunnel, the way the ceiling had been cracked and dripping water. She described how the boy had been wearing a torn blue shirt with some kind of earth animal on it. How he had kept saying the same word over and over in his language, a word she later learned meant mama. With each detail, Hyan-Woo felt something stirring in the back of his mind. Not quite memories, but the shadows of memories. A feeling of running through darkness, the smell of smoke, the weight of someone's hand in his. Jisoo's hologram flickered back to life. Okay, I've got it. In Hyan-Woo, this is strange, really strange. She pulled up a series of displays showing genetic data and location coordinates. According to this, you were at the exact coordinates Princess Arn described during the siege. The timestamp matches. And there's something else. She highlighted a section of the genetic report. Your biometric data was recorded by Velthari sensors at that evacuation point. Standard procedure for processing refugees? The genetic markers match your current profile perfectly. But there's more. You have markers in your DNA that shouldn't be there. Velthari markers. Arn sat up straighter. What kind of markers? Jisoo looked confused. I'm not entirely sure. They appear to be some kind of immune system modification. Advanced cellular regeneration factors. Nothing that occurs naturally in humans. It's like someone edited your genetic code, but the records show no medical procedures were performed on you. Arn's eyes widened. She reached out and gently took Hyan-Woo's hand, turning it over to examine his palm. There, so faint it was almost invisible, was a mark. A silver mark in the shape of a six-pointed star. It had always been there, for as long as Hyan-Woo could remember. He had assumed it was a birthmark. The royal seal, Arn whispered. I did this. When I was young, all Velthari royalty are taught an emergency protection ritual. If someone saves your life, you can mark them. It's biological. It changes their immune system, helps them survive injuries that would kill others. It's ancient. We rarely use it anymore. But I was terrified that day. When we reached the evacuation point and the soldiers took me away, I grabbed your hand and I marked you. I didn't even realize I had done it until later. Hyan-Woo looked at the small silver star on his palm. He had never thought much about it. Just a birthmark. Nothing important. But now, it meant everything. It was proof. Physical proof that Arn's story was true. my mother, Hyanwu said suddenly, his voice rough. Jisoo, what happened to our mother? The official report said she died in the siege, but I never saw the details. No one would tell me. His sister's face became sad. She was killed. But not by the siege itself. According to the classified files, she was an intelligence operative. She was investigating something. War crimes, I think. Someone killed her because of what she found. The files are heavily redacted. I can't see what she discovered. Urin stood up and began pacing. This doesn't make sense. A human intelligence operative investigating war crimes in a Velthari cultural district. Why would she be there? And why would anyone kill her for it? Unless Hyanwu said slowly, the siege wasn't what we were told it was. Unless there was something bigger happening. Something both governments wanted to hide. The two of them looked at each other across the room. A human and an alien, both children of war, both shaped by a day they barely understood. And now, 23 years later, they were starting to realize that Day had been part of something much darker than a simple military conflict. We need to investigate this, Aaron said. Both of us. Something happened during that siege. Something that got your mother killed and almost killed us. Someone doesn't want the truth to come out. Hyanwu nodded. He touched the silver star on his palm, feeling its warmth. Then let's find out what they're hiding. Outside the chamber, Commander Thalvin listened through a concealed monitoring device and immediately sent an encrypted message to parties unknown. The message was simple. They've made the connection. Activate contingency protocols. The deep archives beneath the palace had not been accessed in over a decade. Arn used her royal clearance to bypass 17 different security checkpoints, each one scanning her genetic signature and verifying her authority. Hyanwu followed close behind, his heart pounding as they descended deeper into the fortress-like structure. The walls here were ancient, carved from solid rock that predated the current empire by thousands of years. No one comes down here anymore, Arn explained as they walked through corridors lit by dim emergency lights. All the modern records are digital and stored in the cloud. But the old paper archives, the physical evidence from centuries past, they're all still here, including records from the war. They reached a massive vault door inscribed with warnings in 12 different languages. Arn placed her hand on a scanner, and the door opened with a groan of ancient machinery. Inside, rows of shelves stretched into the darkness, each one loaded with storage containers made of materials designed to last forever. Help me look for anything labeled with the date of the siege, Orin said. Specifically, casualty reports and incident logs from the cultural district. They searched for hours. Dust covered everything, making them both cough and sneeze. But finally, Hyanwu found a container marked with the right date. Inside were dozens of data crystals, each one containing compressed information. They took the entire container back to a reading terminal near the entrance. What they found made both of them go cold. The official story was that the siege had been a military operation. Enemy forces attacking a strategic target. Civilian casualties were described as minimal and unavoidable. But the documents in front of them told a different story. The cultural district wasn't a military target at all. It was residential, full of families, and the attack had been deliberate. Worse, the orders for the attack had come from both sides. Human forces had struck first, bombing residential areas to create chaos. Then Velthari forces had responded, not to defend, but to escalate. Back and forth, each side targeting civilians while claiming the other had started it. The goal wasn't to win the district. The goal was to create maximum casualties, maximum outrage, maximum support for continuing the war. This can't be real, Arn whispered, her hands shaking as she read the reports. My government ordered attacks on our own people. To prolong a war? Hyanwu was reading another file, his face pale. It gets worse. Look at this. There was a list of intelligence operatives from both sides who were getting close to discovering the truth. They were all eliminated. Your government killed them. My government killed them. They were working together to silence anyone who knew. He pulled up another document. And here, my mother's name. She was on the elimination list. They knew she was investigating, and they sent someone to kill her. She died because she was trying to expose this. The realization hit them both at the same time. They weren't just uncovering historical crimes. They were threatening people who were still alive, still in power, still willing to kill to keep their secrets buried. Arn quickly copied the files to a secure storage device, hiding it in a concealed pocket of her formal robes. We need to leave. Now. If anyone knows we found this, the lights in the archive suddenly went out. Emergency backups flickered on, casting everything in a blood-red glow. Alarms began blaring throughout the complex. Security breach. A computerized voice announced in both Velthari and human languages. All personnel evacuate immediately. Lockdown protocols initiating in 60 seconds. Hyenwu and Arn ran for the exit. Behind them, massive blast doors began sliding closed, sealing off sections of the archive. They barely made it through the last door before it slammed shut with a sound like thunder. They kept running, taking stairs 2 at a time, racing toward the surface. When they emerged into the palace proper, they found chaos. Palace guards were rushing everywhere. Diplomats were being herded into secure rooms. And standing in the main corridor, blocking their path, was Commander Thalvin with a squad of heavily armed soldiers. "Your Highness," he said, his voice cold and formal, "you need to come with me. There's been a threat against your life. We're moving you to a secure location." Oren stepped forward, putting herself between Hyenwu and the soldiers. "I'm fine, Commander. The alarm was probably just a malfunction. We were simply researching historical records for the summit negotiations in the deep archives." Thalvin's eyes narrowed. "No one goes to the deep archives. What were you really doing down there?" Before Arn could answer, an explosion rocked the palace. The floor shook, and pieces of the ceiling crashed down around them. Through the smoke and debris, Hyenwu saw figures moving. Assassins, dressed in black armor that seemed to absorb light itself. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. One of them raised a weapon, aiming directly at Arn. Time seemed to slow down. Hyenwu's body moved before his brain could think. Years of combat training in the colonial defense fleet took over. He threw himself in front of the princess, pushing her behind a stone pillar just as the energy weapon fired. The blast caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the ground. Pain exploded through his entire body, worse than anything he had ever felt. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't work properly. Through the haze of agony, he saw the assassins advancing. Then something strange happened. The wound in his shoulder began to glow with silver light, the same silver as the mark on his palm. He felt his flesh knitting back together, cells regenerating at an impossible speed. The Velthari genetic markers that Arn had given him all those years ago were activating, healing him far faster than any human could heal. Within seconds, he was back on his feet. The assassins hesitated, clearly not expecting their target to recover. That hesitation cost them. Palace guards arrived, overwhelming the attackers with superior numbers. The assassins retreated, vanishing into the chaos of the evacuation. Thalvin grabbed Hyenwu by the arm, examining where the wound had been. There was blood on his clothes, but no injury. "Impossible," the commander muttered. "Humans don't heal like that unless... ... He looked at Arn, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You marked him. The royal seal. You gave a human the royal seal." 23 years ago, Arn said defiantly, "He saved my life during the siege. I had every right to mark him. But now he's a security risk," Thalvin countered. "He has Velthari genetics in his body. If our enemies capture him, they could study him, weaponize the seal. Your Highness, you've created a potential disaster." "Or," Hyenwu said, his voice steady, despite the pain still echoing through his body, "I'm proof that humans and Velthari can be more than enemies, that we can help each other, protect each other. Isn't that what this summit is supposed to be about?" Before Thalvin could respond, a new figure emerged from the smoke. She was human, middle-aged, with cold eyes and expensive clothing that marked her as someone important. Director Mingi, head of Earth's intelligence service. Hyenwu recognized her from briefings, though he had never met her personally. "There's been an incident," she announced, her voice carrying authority. "A terrorist attack on the summit. We're evacuating all human personnel immediately." "Hyan Wu, you're coming with me?" "I'm staying with Princess Arin," he replied. "Someone just tried to kill her. I'm not leaving." Binge's expression didn't change. That wasn't a request. Attach. That was an order. "You have classified information in your genetic code now. You're a security asset. Get on the transport ship or be arrested for treason." At the same time, High Priest Kelson appeared from another corridor, flanked by religious guards in ceremonial armor. He was ancient. His scales faded to almost white, but his voice still commanded respect. "Princess Arin, you will cease this foolish investigation immediately. The human must be quarantined until we determine if he poses a threat to the Empire. This summit is over." Arin looked at Hyan Wu, then at the forces gathering on both sides. They were trapped. The conspiracy they had uncovered ran too deep, touched too many powerful people. Fighting openly would only get them both killed. "We need help," she whispered to him. "Someone we can trust. Someone outside the system." Hyan Wu nodded slightly. He had one idea. One person who might still be loyal to the truth his mother had died trying to expose. But reaching that person would mean escaping from both the Velthari Palace and Earth's intelligence service. It would mean going rogue. It would mean declaring war on the very governments they were supposed to serve. Captain Doyun had served with Hyan Wu's mother 25 years ago. He was 52 years old now, with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. But he still commanded the Indomitable with the same fierce loyalty that had made him. Refused 3 promotions because he didn't want a desk job. When he received Hyan Wu's emergency distress signal, coded with his mother's personal encryption key, he didn't ask questions. He just came. The Indomitable dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Velthari space, its weapons powered down but shields at maximum. Doyon sent a message on all diplomatic channels claiming engine trouble and requesting emergency docking rights. It was a thin excuse, but it bought them time. Getting Arin and Hyan Wu off the palace was harder. They had to wait until the chaos from the attack created an opening. When another security alert pulled most of the guards away from the diplomatic shuttle bays, they made their move. Arin used her royal authority to commandeer a small transport, and they launched before anyone could stop them. Thalvin tried to order the planetary defense systems to shoot them down, but Arin overrode his commands with her personal codes. 30 minutes later, they docked with the Indomitable. Captain Doyon met them in the airlock, his hand resting on his sidearm until he confirmed it was really Hyan Wu. Then his face softened into something like sadness. "You look just like her," he said quietly. "Your mother, same eyes. Same stubborn expression when you're about to do something dangerous." "You knew what she was investigating," Hyan Wu said. "It wasn't a question. You knew she was going to die." Doyon nodded slowly. "I tried to stop her. Told her to let it go, that some truths were too dangerous to expose. But she wouldn't listen. She said if we didn't hold our own government accountable, we had no right to call ourselves the good guys." He looked at Arin with cautious respect. "Your Highness, I assume you're here because you found what she was looking for." Morin confirmed. "We need somewhere safe to analyze the data. Somewhere neither government can reach us." "I know a place," Doyon said. "But first, there's someone you both need to meet. Someone who's been waiting a long time for this moment." He led them deep into the ship, past the crew quarters and engineering sections, to a secure area that didn't appear on any of the official deck plans. Behind a hidden door was a small apartment, and inside that apartment was a Velthari male, with deep blue scales and eyes that held decades of grief. Arin gasped. "Thorin, my brother? You're alive?" The Velthari prince stood up from his chair, moving stiffly like someone who had been injured long ago and never fully healed. "Hello, sister. I'm sorry I let you think I was dead. But it was the only way to stay alive long enough to find the truth." The story he told took hours. Prince Thorin had been captured during the war, held in a prison camp, where he witnessed conversations between enemy officers that he wasn't supposed to hear. He learned about the Perpetuation Council, a shadow organization that existed across both civilizations. They were the ones engineering conflicts, manipulating both governments, profiting from endless war. When the war ended, Thorin had been scheduled for execution to silence him, but he had escaped with the help of sympathetic guards who were tired of the bloodshed. He faked his death and had been living in hiding ever since, slowly gathering evidence, waiting for someone with the authority and courage to help him expose the conspiracy. The council has members at the highest levels of both governments, Thorin explained, showing them files on a holographic display. Military leaders, politicians, business executives, they've been operating for over 50 years, maybe longer. Every time peace looks likely, they create an incident. A border skirmish, a terrorist attack, anything to keep the conflict alive. He pulled up financial records showing massive weapons contracts, prison construction deals, surveillance technology purchases, billions of credits flowing to companies owned by council members every time tensions increased. They learned about you and Hyanwu years ago, Thorin continued. When palace medical scanners detected the royal seal on a human child, they flagged it as an anomaly. They've been monitoring both of you ever since, waiting to see if either of you would ever make the connection. Why not just kill us? Hyanwu asked. Because you're more valuable alive, Doyan interjected. Think about it. A human with Velthari genetics. They could study you, figure out how the royal seal works, maybe even replicate it, create hybrid. 500 soldiers with the strengths of both species. The council wanted to wait until you were old enough to be useful as a test subject. Orin felt sick. All those years she had carried guilt about marking a human child. She had thought it was a one-time accident, a desperate act in a moment of terror. But the council had been planning to weaponize her mistake, to turn a gesture of protection into a tool for creating super soldiers. Jessu's face appeared on a holographic screen, transmitted through encrypted channels. I've been analyzing Hyanwu's genetic markers. The changes run deeper than we thought. His immune system, his healing rate, his cellular structure, all of it has been modified, and the modifications are stable. They could theoretically be replicated in other humans. They're not just tracking us, Hyanwu realized. They're studying us. Every medical exam I've ever had, every blood test, all of it was being copied to council databases. They've been preparing for this. Doran nodded grimly. And now that you've found their historical records, they have to act. They can't let this information reach the public. Too many people would demand investigations, tribunals, justice. The council would lose everything. So what do? Aaron asked. We can't fight them through official channels. They control the channels. We can't run and hide forever. They'll find us eventually. Doyan smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had spent 23 years waiting for revenge. We do what your mother would have done, Hyanwu. We tell everyone. Not through official channels. Through every channel at once. Flood the networks with information until it's impossible to contain. He explained his plan. They had a journalist contact. A young woman named Sora, who ran an independent news service that operated outside government control. She had a network of sources across dozens of worlds, and she had been investigating the council for years without enough evidence to publish. If they gave her everything they had found, the historical records, the financial documents, testimony from Prince Thorin, genetic evidence from Hyanwu, she could create a story too big to ignore. But she'll need more than just data, Aaron said. She'll need us. Living proof. We have to go public. Stand in front of cameras and tell our story. The moment we do that, we become targets, Hyanwu warned. They'll try to kill us. Discredit us. Paint us as traitors and liars. Then we make sure we survive long enough for the truth to spread, Doyen replied. And we do it at the one place where both governments will have to respond publicly. We go back to the summit. It was insane. Return to the place where they had just escaped. Walk into a room full of people who wanted them dead or captured. And announce their findings to the entire galaxy. But it was also the only plan that had any chance of working. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Jisoo provided detailed medical reports on Hyanwu's genetic modifications. Thorin compiled his evidence into a comprehensive timeline. Sora arranged for her network to be ready to broadcast simultaneously across every major media platform. And Aaron contacted every ally she had, every noble and official who had ever questioned the official narrative of the war. On the morning of their return, Hunu stood in front of a mirror, adjusting his diplomatic uniform. The silver star on his palm caught the light. He thought about that 5-year-old boy who had saved an alien princess without understanding what it would mean for his future. "Are you scared?" Aaron asked from behind him. "Terrified," he admitted, "but my mother died trying to expose the truth." "I can't let that death be meaningless." "Neither can I," Aaron said. She placed her hand on his shoulder, and he could feel the warmth of her touch through his uniform. "We're going to change everything. Both our worlds. There's no going back after this." Hyan Wu turned to face her. "Then let's make sure we change it for the better." The Indomitable began its approach to Velthor Prime, broadcasting diplomatic credentials and requesting permission to return to the summit. On the planet below, Director Mingy and High Priest Kelson received the news and immediately began planning how to neutralize the threat. But they didn't know about Sora, they didn't know about Thorin, and they didn't know that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't guns or ships or political influence. Sometimes it's just the truth, spoken loud enough that everyone can hear. The summit hall was packed, every seat filled, every species represented. Hundreds of diplomatic personnel crowded together for the closing ceremonies. The Centennial Summit was supposed to end with celebration, new trade agreements signed and peace reinforced for another 100 years. Instead, there was tension in the air thick enough to taste. Hyanwu and Urin walked through the main entrance with Captain Doyon and a security team from the Indomitable. Palace guards moved to intercept them, but Urin raised her hand, her voice carrying across the hall with royal authority. "I am Princess Urin, heir to the Eternal Throne. I claim the right of public address granted to all royal family members during summit proceedings. You will allow me to speak." The guards hesitated. They could see Commander Thalvin making his way through the crowd, and Director Mingy was already speaking urgently into a communication device. But the right of public address was ancient law, written into the summit charter itself. To deny it would cause a scandal that could tear apart the entire gathering. The current speaker, a dignitary from a neutral world, stepped aside. Urin walked to the central platform, Han Wu beside her. Behind them, massive holographic displays flickered to life, showing not the official summit logo, but a countdown timer. 60 seconds. That's how long they had before Sora's network would begin broadcasting their evidence to every corner of both civilizations. "My name is Princess Erin of the Velthari Empire," she began, her voice amplified across the hall and transmitted to millions of viewers watching the closing ceremonies. "And I am here to tell you about a lie that has shaped our history for decades, a lie that has cost countless lives, a lie that those in power hope you will never discover." Director Mingy was shouting orders, trying to cut the transmission. High Priest Kelson was demanding that security remove the princess from the platform. But it was too late. The countdown reached 0 and across both human and Velthari space. Every major news network, social media platform, and communication channel simultaneously received the data package. Historical records appeared on screens everywhere. Documents showing how both governments had deliberately targeted civilians during the war. Financial records proving that military contractors and politicians had profited from prolonged conflict. Medical files showing experimental programs designed to create hybrid soldiers, and at the center of it all, the story of 2 children whose chance meeting 23 years ago had uncovered everything. Hyunwoo stepped forward, raising his hand to show the silver star on his palm. "I am living proof of the connection between our species. Princess Urin marked me with the royal seal when I saved her life during the siege of Velthor Prime. I was 5 years old. She was a child. We didn't understand politics or war or hatred. We just knew that we needed each other to survive." The holographic displays showed footage that Thorin had recovered from old security cameras, grainy images of a burning city, of a small human boy pulling an alien princess through rubble, of them emerging together into the light. The audience watched in stunned silence. "My mother died investigating war crimes," Hyan Wu continued, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. She was murdered by people who wanted to keep the truth hidden. People who are here, in this room, right now. He pointed at Director Minji, the head of Earth's intelligence service, who ordered the elimination of anyone who got too close to the conspiracy. Then at High Priest Kelson, a religious leader who used faith as a cover for political manipulation and murder. The accusations hung in the air like bombs. Security forces from both sides started moving toward the platform. Captain Doyen's crew had positioned themselves strategically throughout the hall. Not to fight, but to bear witness. To make sure that whatever happened next would happen in front of thousands of cameras. A figure emerged from the crowd, moving slowly but with unmistakable authority. Elder Matriarch Sonara was the oldest living Valthari, so ancient that she remembered a time before the Empire existed. She rarely spoke at summit events, preferring to observe. But now she walked to the platform, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. I have watched these summit proceedings for 300 years, she said, her voice thin but clear. And in all that time I have suspected what these young people have now proven. I have seen the pattern. Every time peace approaches, there is an incident. Every time cooperation seems possible, there is conflict. I lacked evidence, but I always knew. The question was, who would be brave enough to provide it? She turned to face Director Minji and High Priest Kelson. You have dishonored both our species. You have betrayed the trust placed in you. You have murdered innocents and called it necessary. And worst of all, you have stolen the futures of people like these two, who should have grown up in peace instead of carrying the scars of your manufactured war. From another entrance, Prince Thorin appeared, flanked by loyalist guards who had helped him remain hidden for decades. The sight of the supposedly dead prince caused chaos. Delegates shouted in confusion. News networks went into overdrive trying to verify what they were seeing. I am Prince Thorin, he announced, and I have spent 23 years gathering evidence against the Perpetuation Council, an organization that has infiltrated both our governments and countless others. They profit from war. They manipulate both sides. They are the real enemy we should have been fighting all along. Evidence continued flooding across every screen. Names, financial transactions, encrypted communications between council members discussing how to trigger the next conflict. It was overwhelming, undeniable, and it was being recorded by billions of viewers across dozens of worlds. Director Minji tried to speak, to offer denials and excuses, but her voice was drowned out by the roar of outrage from the crowd. High Priest Kelson attempted to leave the hall, but loyal soldiers loyal to Arryn and Thorin blocked his path. They were trapped. The conspiracy had depended on secrecy, and now that secrecy was shattered beyond repair. In the hours that followed, the galaxy erupted. Protests filled the streets of capital worlds. Military officers began defecting, refusing to follow orders from potentially compromised superiors. Politicians who had nothing to do with the council rushed to distance themselves from those who did. The entire power structure that the Perpetuation Council had built over decades began collapsing under the weight of public fury. Hyan Wu and Arryn stood together on the platform, watching the chaos unfold. They had done it. The truth was out. But they both knew this was just the beginning. There would be trials, investigations, years of painful revelations as both civilizations confronted what had been done in their names. Jisoo contacted Hyan Wu through his communicator. You did it, brother. The council is finished. But there's something you should know. The genetic modifications you carry, we've analyzed them completely. They're stable, reproducible, but only with full consent and understanding. Medical teams from both species want to study them to see if they could help people, not hurt them. What do you think? Hyan Wu looked at Arryn. She nodded slowly. Your choice, she said. I never asked permission before marking you. If you want to keep that knowledge private, I will support you. No, Hyan Wu decided. Let them study it. Let them learn. But only if the research is open, transparent, and used to help people. No more secrets. No more weapons programs. If our connection can show that humans and Velthari can work together, then let it. Captain Doyen approached them, a rare smile on his weathered face. Your mother would be proud. Both of you did what she couldn't. You survived long enough to tell the truth. Elder Matriarch Sonara called for order in the summit hall. We will establish tribunals to investigate these crimes, she announced. Both species will provide judges. The trials will be public and transparent. Those found guilty will face justice under the laws they claim to uphold. And most importantly, we will begin real negotiations. Not for the benefit of politicians and contractors, but for the people of both our worlds who deserve peace. The summit that was supposed to end with ceremony instead transformed into an emergency session. Delegates who had arrived expecting routine proceedings found themselves voting on revolutionary changes, military budget cuts, independent oversight committees, educational programs teaching the true history of the war, and formal apologies to all civilian casualties, acknowledged publicly for the first time, weeks later. When the immediate crisis had passed and the tribunals were underway, Hyanwu and Arin stood at a memorial being constructed on the border between human and Velthari space. It would honor all the civilians who had died in the war, regardless of species. The names of thousands killed in the siege would be inscribed on black stone that would stand for centuries. Among those names was one that meant everything to Hyanwu, his mother, the intelligence operative who had started the investigation that her son had finished. She would have liked this, Arin said quietly, standing beside him. A memorial that tells the truth instead of hiding it. She would have liked you, Hyanwu replied. She always said that the only way to end conflict was to see the person on the other side as human. Or in your case, as someone worthy of the same respect and dignity. Someone worth saving. Arin reached out and took his hand, their fingers intertwining. The silver star on his palm glowed faintly in the sunlight. You saved me twice, she said. Once, when we were children, and again, when you chose to stand with me even though it could have cost you everything. We saved each other, Hyanwu corrected. That's what cooperation looks like. That's what peace looks like. Two people from different worlds helping each other survive. They stood there together as construction crews finished the memorial's foundation. Above them, human and Velthari ships patrolled together for the first time in history. Protecting the border not from each other, but from anyone who might try to restart the conflict. It wasn't perfect. There were still people who clung to old hatreds, still politicians who wanted to exploit fear for profit, but those voices were growing quieter every day. The galaxy was changing. And it had changed because two children, separated by species and circumstance, had found each other in the darkness and refused to let go. Because a young diplomat had the courage to question his own government. Because a princess had chosen truth over comfortable lies. Because ordinary people had decided that they deserved better than endless war. Hyanwu looked at the memorial, his mother's name carved in stone, and felt something like peace settle in his chest. The debt was paid. The truth was told. And the future, for the first time in his life, looked bright.